So, a genealogy of visual culture from art to culture. So, this is basically a part one of the book, a whole part of the book wherein they discussed how perspective or how the lenses of the eyes can help or affects the perspective or how affects how one sees, and it also further discuss more. I mean, the topics become from the eyes, it becomes more broader to feminism, to how the art is being collected, how women are being viewed as, and how how an artist is viewing, how an artist paints on on uh on people, and also how the artist lives, and how we should view paintings as such with Tropical Amnesia by Paul Virilio. So this is basically the
Problema po yata sa audio.
ako ba.
Oo, medyo choppy.
Sorry, I will turn off my video then. Okay, how about now?
Okay na, okay na.
Okay na. Okay, so Optics by René Descartes. So René Descartes was the one who discovered how, not really discovered, but rather he philosophized how the rays of light are being refracted by the lens of the eye, and then from the lens of the eye, this rays of light was refracted. So you can imagine the eye as a camera, and the rays of light goes inside the lens, and then it becomes inverted, and then this inversion will be uh, developed or processed by the brain, and then that becomes your vision. And at the same time, this is if you're familiar with the Cartesian model during geometry or trigonometry, uh, Rene Descartes was the one who developed that. He also made it made the refraction of the light into a mathematical perspective. But this perspective is calculated with 1 point perspective, and it does not include perspective with 2 points, 2 points or 3 points, 4 points, up to six. So the visual representation of optics by Rene Descartes is fairly limited to the kind of vision that we only can it is only we can only calculate the vision, or how the rays of light are being refracted to the eye um, by only 1 point perspective. But if you remember the camera is something that was developed in order uh, to see or photograph a memory or a picture, a scene. But also uh, it was designed with the theory of the optics, or the theory of how light can be refracted to, and then be produced to a certain kind of paper or chemical before. And if you can imagine the camera today, we could have different kinds of lenses and different kind of magnification techniques. And it is the same also with our eyes. Our eyes can zoom in, or parang somehow we could focus on one object at a time, and the rest would be blurred. So that is the optics, or natural optics. But with Rene Descartes, that is different because the optics here with Rene Descartes is um, just one point perspective. So with one point perspective, um, when you look at the distance, there is a one vanishing point, and that is what your and one horizontal line, one vanishing point, and the it looks like you have a triangle there, one triangular shape with one point perspective. So that is your one point perspective, and that is what is discussed by Rene Descartes. Oops. And uh, he also discussed about sensory awareness. So he discussed how we have different senses, but somehow we can only focus on just one. So, and then he also discussed how even if we have various senses, there is a certain what do you call this? There is a certain idea, or we know something is that is, for example, a dog is a dog, in spite of how many different kinds of dogs or how many dogs look differently, we know that is a dog. So because of the sensory awareness, so he says that we have a sense of touch, we have a smell, sight, and what else, uh, touch, feel, taste, and hearing. But in spite of all this, we know an object by looking at it, or by because we have a certain cultural or a certain predisposition to knowing that object by mere resemblance of shape, or because our culture defines us with it. So, an example is how a little ink is placed there on a piece of paper, but that ink could represent as forests, town, people, even battles or storms, even with just that ink. The same. It is also the same with um, painting or drawing, in a way that we are just using paint, but we could make it look like 3D. So basically, he is just telling us that uh, even if we have multiple senses, we can have awareness of many different qualities of the bodies, or different qualities of the objects and stuff, by the differences in the movement caused by them of the brain. So basically, the sensory, or knowing that what that object is because our brain is processing it, or telling us that that object is the same object, or that object is a tumbler, for example, or that object is a dog, and something like that. So that is sensory awareness, and that is also what he said, that the senses is in general, that we are that the senses are being processed by the brain, and what we see, hear, feel, or how we uh, know an object, or is because of how our brain process it to be. So ayun. And then this is what you call, diba, if you remember about the Cartesian um, model, and also ayun, and optics. This is what you call the Cartesian Perspectivalism. It is it is the theory, or the theory wherein, or the name, what they call that, every representation are in the mind, and not because of how it is, and that representation, or how we see, is just in the mind. It is how it is being processed in the mind. So that is what Cartesian perspectivalism is. And also this kind of model with the senses is the reigning visual model of modernity. Sorry, I'm having class. Can you? Okay, it's in the back, but can you please close the door? Santi, close the door! Sorry po, wait lang. Okay. So, sorry, my nephew. So, um, so that is, this is a visual model of modernity, because um, they say that uh, this theory is best experienced naturally, and that it has a scientific worldview. So ayun, so meaning scientific worldview, meaning that um, every person who uh, can relate to it or can understand to it naturally by just by seeing and stuff like that. And then we have scopic regimes of modernity by Martin J. This is the chapter 3 of from or chapter or another chapter from a genealogy of visual culture from art and culture. Martin J. wrote that no single modern mode of vision, there is no single modern mode of vision, but rather there are several mode of vision, and that could consist the scopic regime of modernity, and that uh, and that it looks like one because it is integrated into different complex visual theories and practices. So he wrote it in 1988, and that he also emphasized that the Cartesian Perspectivalism does not produce the definite truth about sight, and it is the representation of one highly influential mode of representing vision, and that is the visual grid. The visual grid is a concept which is geometrically isotropic, rectilinear, abstract, and uniform. When he said that this is about the Cartesian perspectivalism and the visual grid, he meant that the 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 grid or everything that we see is calculated mathematically, and it is uh, somehow limited to that mathematical. Sandy, close the door. I'm so sorry. And so it is limited to that mathematical equations. So if there, and of course we're not, all of us is not equally gifted with math or can um, or understands math or can solve math, and even mathematicians can discover new things with math, and there are a lot of mathematical equations and logic that uh, can is constantly developing or changing. So with this being limiting the perspective to one plane is uh, limited and kind of not um, good for what is happening or what is happening here, or how you can explain what we see and how it is different from other people. So that's why he said it is geometrically isotropic, rectilinear, abstract, and uniform. So, the difference between Renaissance artists believes that the triangular receding space produced by perspective was a representation of how the eye actually saw. So if you could see how from this eye, and then it would the scope would be higher uh, as the space goes on. So so it's just like a camera or a CCTV where there is a blind spot below. But that is basically how the Renaissance artists believe, and that is what they think is how the eyes see. But um, but modern artists like Piet Mondrian believe on the grid. So if you know how to draw a portrait using a grid, or how to use um, framing a scene by using hands or a frame or a kind of tool. So um, that um, modern artists knew that they used the grid because they knew that the how we see things can be abstract or can be different to one another, or unexplainable and such. So, with the invention of perspective, uh, because of Piet Mondrian, there was also explanation or uh, an explanation or uh, he Martin J also discussed about invention of perspective and how perspective can change um, the point of view, or change the how the Cartesian or how the Cartesian perspectivalism or how the Cartesian model can be debunked. So, um, so he also said how there is a lot of people who actually um, said something about perspective, and that there was a discovery, a rediscovery, and then therefore an invention of perspective. But for just for lecture purposes, or um, just FYI, um, the discovery was made by Bruno Leschi. Sorry, I don't know how to um, pronounce the Italian name. And then it was discovered by Alberti, and that Alberti provided a theoretical uh, inter. He provided a interpretation theoretically, and then there are scholars like Evans, Panofsky, Kautheimer, Edgerton White, and Kobovi. Um, they were able to investigate virtually the aspects of perspectivalist revolution, this technical, how it can be, how it can change from aesthetically, how can it affect the psychology, the religious opinions, or the religious perspectives, and even how it can affect economic and political views. So these people invented the perspective and how perspective can change how we view things. So with Cartesian model, uh, mathemat everything was calculated mathematically, and there are regularities in optics, and that they think that because everything can be calculated mathematically, it is God's will. So that's the difference between perspective and the optics. But because of perspective, there is a new concept of space, and it became isotropic, correctly linear, abstract, and then uniform. It depends on how you uh, perceive space, and that the three-dimensional space of the perspectival vision could be rendered into two-dimensional surface. So this is how Martin J. Uh, Martin J. put point out that the dots of ink or the inks that we use can be rendered two dimension. I mean, can represent 3D objects like forests, mountains, and such. So, ayon, that is how the perspectivalism was invented. And then on the fourth chapter from the Genealogy of Visual Culture, we have also Ronald Barthes. So, Ronald Barthes pointed out that image is from the root. Roland.
Roland Barthes.
Roland Barthes. Nagulat ako. So, from Roland Barthes, we have, he pointed out that image is from the root word of imitari, which means representation, which also means resurrection, and it is also it mirrors to how we experience our life, or how we experience or how we see things. So for Roland Barthes, that is that. But besides that, he also believed that there are different signs in an image. That is a signifier, which is the scene, and the signified, which is what it is meant. So, in this essay by Roland Barthes, he was able to look in different ways which meaning can be derived from a certain sign or from a certain image. So, let me. So, from Barthes' essay, we could derive, or we could get here the science of science, or this is what we also call semiology, which or the science of science, which offers a practical means to analyze the complex ways in which the visual representation can create meaning and have emotional impact. So, for him, there are four signs. So, we have the linguistic, pure image, signified, and the signifier. So, all of these can be inside in a one poster, for example, or on one advertisement, for example. When you say linguistic, this is the typical sign. It can be denotational and connotational, and that usually this is something that is written in language, and it can also be counted as one image. Sorry, can counted as one message. So, for example, in the poster, you have come and see blah 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 blah. That is the linguistic part um, of the image or a poster. And then you also have a pure image. A pure image is a series of discontinuous signs, and this is also the composition of the image. So basically, the pure image is look as the whole, or a part of a poster with with for example, a lady, so that is the lady and stuff. So sorry. And then we also have the signified. The signified requires knowledge, and it is also imparted as a facets of a widespread culture. So the signified is part of sorry, I will close the door first. So, the signified requires knowledge imparted as part of facets of a widespread culture. Uh, we already learned how uh, a sign can differ from, or an image or a symbol can be different from one culture to another, and that the signified is also like that. It has a prior knowledge or implication or an influence from culture or a certain experience that can or predisposition or pre uh, knowledge before that makes the symbol uh, symbol um, the symbol significant or be understandable. And then we also have the signifier. So the signified is the meaning itself, but it has influence from culture and prior knowledge and experiences. So the signifier is a sign that is related to the signified, but it is uh, it is parang redundant in meaning. So it is included, or it is part of the connoted sign of the linguistic message, and the knowledge it draws upon is already more particular. So, signified and signifier comes hand in hand, but the signifier can also stand redundant to the linguistic sign. So, ayun. But the signifier is more particular of a sign. So, J said that the task now is thus to reconsider each type of message so as to explore it in its generality. So, we have to look at an image without losing the sight of our aim or our purpose of understanding the overall structure of the image. No matter um, how we try to look at which is the linguistic, which is the pure image, the signifier and the signified, the parts of an image, also have to look at the image of the overall structure and how this interrelationship of the messages can come up with a message. And that the four order of the messages or the signs and the messages can be modified a little by inversion of the cultural and the literal message. So the image can have uh, a cultural message and it can also have a literal message. Those two could clash, and be uh, those two could be also be different to each other, but also sometimes it could also be the same with each other. And in that way, the it is a little bit iconic, as it could be as the first message, the cultural message can be imprinted on the second, and the literal message could be the support of the symbolic message. So we also have another chapter by Griselda Pollock, um, where she discusses how the gaze of a woman can, I mean, not the a gaze of a man um, can affect the or how how women are situated inside a culture or inside a perspective or inside how the laws sees them as can be can affect how they are put inside a museum and such, or how they are put into um, or how they are made and so forth. So the modernity and the spaces of femininity, this chapter um, discusses analysis of science within the perspective of gender. So in a way, Griselda Pollock uh, calls our attention of how the modern grid of visual representation claims to be an abstraction, but rather, in fact, it is fundamentally structured by gender. So, um, so in this chapter, we we are being told that a modern woman is divided into two categories. We have the lady and the fallen women. And the lady is, for example, these are the women that are in social status called as women with high pedigree or high high moral status. They are, for example, seen mostly in theaters, in parks, but a fallen woman could be seen backstage in bars, cafe, and brothels. Um, they would, for example, be, um, they would experience promiscuity, and um, that they are also, and it also further discussed how certain women and women artists are supposed to look only within those sections designated ladylike. So way before, in this chapter, Griselda Pollock said that um, way before in museums and such, um, there are certain aspects of the museum where this high status woman shouldn't go into, and that certain women with lower pedigree or not considered as lady or ladylike goes to. So meaning high status women or socialites, or for example royalty, or those that are morally, or uh, they call it women with good status in society, would look only those would be uh, would go only in the certain area, and they wouldn't go to certain areas like bars, cafe. Otherwise, they would be called as the fallen woman. So for them, before, the bars, cafes, and that women of the backstage can only are not ladylike, and they are considered fallen. So, um, in a way, uh, this produces a masculine sexuality, and that kasi certain people, certain women, those who are educated cannot go into these areas, and that in a way um, there is a surge to masculine sexuality because the people who are educated, or women who are educated in a certain way, uh, hides, and that men can only see those women who are promiscuous, or promiscuous to their idea. So this is a table, this one. So you have the ladies here, and then you have the fallen women. So basically, the the artists uh, who only um, paint the ladies or noble ladies. For example, ladies are debutantes, young women of fashionable society, matrons, mothers, children, elegant families. Those are painted by Renoir, Manet, Cassatt, and Morisot. And then you also have the fallen women. These are women that are considered in theater, backstage, cafe, follies, brothel, uh, and for example, those are dancers, mistresses, and kept women, courtesan, um, or a prostitute, or a potent image of a wanton beauty, or poor slaves, or filthy stews. Those are mostly um, painted by artists like Degas, Manet, Renaud, Degas, Guys. So that is why somehow fallen women or fallen women in their perspective are, and that modernity is modernity. I mean, the museum can be look like there have masculine sexuality in this area, or masculine gaze, and that women are more likely nude and stuff like that. So there is also the idea how noble women shouldn't be out to public because they are more vulnerable to compromising gays, meaning stalkers or men who have um, different agendas, and that these social spaces way before are being policed by men's watching women, and that the spectator um, the spectator of men, I mean, even the man is just looking at the image. Uh, Even if the man is just looking, the woman becomes the object of the painting. For example, this part here, um, she gave Pollock gave an example of wherein a painting was of a woman looking at an audience, and the woman is part of the audience in the theater, but um, among the audience there is um, a frame of the audience as us being, you know, watching the woman, but also a part of the audience. There is also a man watching the lady instead of watching um, the what is in the
Performer.
theater
Performer.
performer. Yeah. So in a way, um, women were being vulnerable to these certain kinds of cases, which means that women are being limited to going out or being going to a certain kind of group, because men are like marking the their territory, and how and they move more freely than women before. That's why only women with only fallen women can move more freely than noble women. So in a way, um, what is seen or what is painted more of are those of fallen women, and more so, Pollock suggests that femininity is not a condition of the woman being sexualized, but rather it is how the law gives them, or like, for example, it was the law that women should not go in cafes or in bars, or the women who are in the backstage are considered um fallen. So in a way, that is how it shapes the perspective of women. It And that the femininity is not in condition of women, but rather it is organized by law. And way before, women are not always painted uh, nude, but rather they were painted also with dresses, but they were painted in a way that the audience will see them, and that in a way, their perspective goes to the woman, and not and it becomes sexualized, and the woman becomes sexualized, objectified, even if the woman in the painting is covered and so forth. So in a way, the spaces of how women are being confined into, and how women are being uh, painted pictorially, can contribute how uh, female are being sexualized by men, and so forth. And is that clear? Well, um, another um, another is a Modern Art Museum by Carol Duncan. So this is an essay by Carol Duncan, and he how she also she further commented on the viewpoint of Griselda Pollock. So she
Siguro
says,
before I'm sorry to interrupt you, no? Before we proceed to the next essay of Modern Art Museum by Carol Duncan, I just want to add something about the femininity and space of by Griselda Pollock.
okay, sir.
We can actually apply what she is discussing about the femininity and the modern spaces, kumbaga. Actually, this is one of my papers, no, when I was taking my MA in communication research and mass comm. Kasi we can actually analyze, no, kunyari sa TV commercial, yun kay Pollock kasi sabi niya, no, meron dalawang binary categories of women, no, sa mga paintings ni na tawag niyan ni na Degas. Okay? So, may binary categories, may fallen women and the ladies, parang ganun tipo. We can actually apply this, no? Yung categories ng no? Parang nurturing support women naman sa atin. Tapos yung women of erotic desire. Kanino nga ba tong anyway, pareho naman yung discourse na binabanggit nitong, I forgot yung series na nagsabi nito, no? John Hall yata. John Story or John Hall. Anyway, yung sa kanya, i-analyze yung mga TV commercials, i-analyze yung mga roles ng mga women sa movies, sa TVs, and so on and so forth. So parang kay John Story, no? And then yun nga, the binary categories na identify doon was parang nurturing support women, di ba? So sa mga TV commercial, saan yung spaces ng mga babae pagka yung mga tawag nito, mga basic support, products, no? Like for example, mga cleaning, mga detergent bars, and so on and so forth. It's either nasa kitchen sila, nasa laundry area, di ba? Pagka magluluto, nasa kitchen sila. Pagka nasa, So these are the spaces ng women, no? As women, as a nurturing support system. Pero pagka women of erotic desire, no? So mapapansin niyo yung sa mga TV commercial, kunyari tungkol sa Panlinis ng bahay. Saan yung mga spaces ng mga babae doon? Anyone? So, yun nga, no? Tulad ng banggit ko, it's either nasa kitchen, o kaya nagluluto, di ba? O kaya nasa laundry area, naglalaba, no?
Domesticated, sir.
Yes, domesticated spaces, no? Parang ganyan tipo. So, ayun yung mga spaces na dinidepict parate sa TV commercial or sa movies or sa TVs, no? Especially sa atin, ganun din, di ba? Pareho pa rin. Kahit na yung mga TV commercial natin. Kunyari yung magbubunot, no? Para pakintabi yung sahig. Magsising and dance yung mga babae, yung mga nanay, yung mga it's either kasi yun yung target audience, kumbaga, 'di ba, sa TV commercial. Pero pagka women of erotic desire, saan na yung nila? It's either nasa bar, 'di ba? May nag-iinom mga lalaki, tapos ang produkto pang lalaki, mga liquor kunyari, may nag-iinom ang mga lalaki, biglang may papasok na it's either nakasakay ng kabayo, nakabikini, di ba? So, ganun yung biglang magpe-penetrate siya sa men's reserve or men's parang area ng kalalakihan. Parang ganun yun So, yun yung makikita nating dichotomy. Dito kay Pollock, napaka-importante nung yung spaces na dinidefine ng femininity, no? Kasi kunyari yung pagka sinabi niyang ladies, ito yung mga debutantes, mga educated, etc., na dinidepict noon sa mga paintings ng modern artists like Degas, Monet, no? Parang ganun yun, no? So may mga ballet dancer and so on and so forth. So napaka-importante ng space din, no? Kung titingnan ninyo tong part na to, nagsimula tayo sa power of the optic. Tapos paano natin titingnan in our personal capacity, experience natin. No, paano natin ini-interpret yung mga images. Tapos maganda rin yung discussion yung kay Martin J, yung paano natin ina-apply yung perspective, no, sa paggagawa ng mga artworks, parang ganun tipo. Pero hindi rin yun nagtatapos doon. Meron din tinatawag na gaze, no? Yung gaze napaka-importante. Yung kay Griselda Pollock, yung gender gaze ang dinidiscuss niya rito, no? Kasi meron ding mga tinatawag na racial gaze or class gaze, no? Yung pangmamaliit ng pagka lalong-lalo na ngayon napakalakas ng pagka sinabi nating mahihirap, mga bobong butante yan. So anong klaseng gaze ang tinitingnan natin dito? Yung class gaze. Di ba? So, kahit sa mga visual visual paraphernalia nila, no? Kunyari the DDS would come up with tigre ng norte at agila ng south, something like that. Pero paano nila dinipict yun? Anong klaseng gaze ang basa ng mga mga artist na graduate at mayayabang, no? Sasabihin ang pangit, ang baduy, and so on and so forth. So merong class gaze din, no? So yun yung importante, no? Sa diskusyon na to, yung optics, yung gaze, no? And later on may tinatawag pa tayong scopophilia. Pagdating natin sa pornography, reading pornography, no? Yung scopophilia, no? Sino magko-cover nun? Ako yata o si
Ako po, sir.
Si Hides. So yung mga ganun tipo. Ang daming klaseng paano natin tinitingnan, paano tayo binubuo ng isip natin kung paano tumingin at paano natin titingnan. Parang ganun yung importanteng diskusyon dito sa Okay? So, sorry to interrupt you, Lucille, no? Pero
Okay lang, sir.
napakahalaga to give you an overview of this chapter.
Yes.
Lalo-lalo na sa atin as visual artists, no?
Yes, sir.
Sige, please continue. May tanong kayo before we proceed to the next Modern Art Museum kay Carol Duncan?
Sir, ako po.
Wala naman po.
Si Carlo may tanong daw. Yes, Carlo.
Sir, ano po yun? May nag-create po ba ng sinasabi nyo katulad ng yung...
Okay, papasok yan sa report mo. Doon sa class, sa colonialism. Ano nga yung report mo?
Sa yung pong lahi at post-colonial po.
Oo, yung post-colonial. Kasama yan doon, no? Pero ang sinasabi ni ang tanong siguro ang masasagot natin dito sa tanong ni Carlo kung paano na-create, no? Ito ay bunga ng tinatawag na yung patriarchal dominance ng pagbubuo ng lipunan. Okay? So sa patriarchal dominance, no? And at the same time meron tayong tinatawag na hegemony. Ano ba yung hegemony? Sino ba yung nagre-report noon? Yung hegemony, kumbaga, nabubuo ito or buo ito na dumadaloy sa sa kaisipan at kalamnan ng bawat tao. Kung paano nagkakaroon nito ng pagbasa, pag-perceive sa mga ganitong klaseng reading, no? Visual reading, kumbaga. A good example would be, kunyari architect tayo, no? At gagawa tayo ng banyo para sa babae at banyo para sa lalaki. Parati ko itong pagdating sa spaces and femininity. No? Ang banyo ng babae, no? Cubicle by cubicle. Tama? Tama ba, Lucille?
Yes, sir.
Cubicle by cubicle. Oo. Tapos wala siyang urinal bowl. Di ba?
Meron, sir.
Diretso na siya sa toilet bowl. Okay? So, yung object pa lang, nagdidictate na kagad kung para kanino at para saan. Okay? Paano papasok ang dominance ng pagkalalaki or male hegemony sa pagbubuo, sa pagde-design ng banyo or kasilyas, no? So kung titingnan natin, ang lalaki pwedeng gumamit ng kasilyas ng pambabae. Tama? Pwede siyang pumasok at pumasok sa cubicle at doon umihi or kung ano man yung gagawin niya. 'Di ba? So, nandun yung kumbaga yung reserve, yung male reserve, yung female reserve, pwedeng mapasok ng male reserve. Whereas yung babae, pag pumasok siya sa CR ng lalaki, there's this imposing structure or object. What is that? The urinal bowl. Tama? Hindi niya pwedeng gamitin yung urinal bowl na yan. Ever. It would be very, parang napaka-awkward for her to urinate in the urinal bowl na panlalaki. Diba? So meron kagad, struktura pa lang, object pa lang, meron na kagad ini-impose na male hegemony, ng male dominance. Diba? Tama ba, Carlo? Do you agree?
Sir, yes. Opo.
So sa pagbubuo, pagdi-design mismo ng kasilyas, sa space mismo, simpleng space, ito ay pambabae, ito ay panlalaki. Meron na kagad ganun na dictate.
Sir,
Okay.
pag-relate mo din dun sa una yung sinabi dati, no, na nakukondition din dun pa lang sa pag-establish ng mga laruan sa mga bata.
Exactly, oo. Sa mga laruan pa lang ng mga bata, ina-identify na kagad, no, ang mga babae sa dalawang klase. It's either nurturing support system, so bibilan mo sila ng luto-lutuan, plantsa-plantsahan, what else? Di ba? Dollhouse, etc., etc. Di ba? Pero pagka naman sa women as erotic desire, no? Kung baga mag-emulate siya anong magiging itsura niya paglaki niya, bibilan mo siya ng Barbie, di ba? So kung titingnan mo lahat, naka-geared towards sa male dominance. kahit bata pa lang yung lipunan. No? So nag-thumbs up si Ides. Do you agree, Ides? May gusto kang sabihin? Baka may gusto ka idagdag sa mga dinidiscuss natin.
Sir, naalala ko lang yung last na parang raid ng national PNP sa Bulacan, no? May mga ni-raid, hinuling mga matatanda na sabi nila mga NPA daw na galing Cagayan Valley.
Mm-hmm.
Tapos yung poster ng Gabriela. Mali
oo.
pa yung spelling, babe, di ba? Para sa babae at bayan. Pero ganun, unconsciously.
Parang, nakapagpagawa pala sila ng poster. Parang ganun yung dating nila. Yung irony of it. So yung mga ganun tipo, di ba? So, pwedeng gamitin against pa rin, no? Ginagamit pa rin ito bilang pampuksa, no? Itong mga ganitong klaseng mga ganitong klaseng imahe. Parang ganyan tipo. Kunyari, ikaw, kaya natuwan-tuwa ako sa pink no? Sa pink na yung mga lalaki na nagsusuot ng pink ngayon. Kasi parang parang they break the color, no? The color reserve of pink for women. Kumbaga, weak, 'di ba, pagka sinabing babae, weak, and so on and so forth. May exercise ako diyan dati sa dichotomy ng meaning ng semiotic, no? Parang gano'n. Tapos pagka weak, babae, subordinate babae, and so on and so forth, no? Tapos ang colors niya assigned sa kanya ay pink. Pero ngayon mga lalaki na wala na kaming pakialam, no? Magsusuot na kami ng pink, something like that. So naiba, ito yung sinasabi natin, dynamic yung and polymorphic yung cultural meaning. 'Di ba? Parang ganon. Pero paano rin 'to ginagamit ngayon sa mga kunyari yung pinanto ni Ides, no? Na etong grupo na to sa Bulacan, no, biglang nagkaroon ng mga poster ng mga Gabriela, tapos ina-identify nila sa Reds to, di ba? Tapos may mga babes pa, may mga area doon, something like that.
Opo.
Di ba?
Alam mong alam mong
Stage.
planted yung planted kasi para sa babe at bayan, di ba? Parang,
di ba? Di ba? Parang, ano ba tong mga to? Mag-isip naman kayo. Baka kailangan nyo ng visual culture, scholar para bigla kong nag-change, side. Baka gusto nyo i-hire kami. Hindi, joke lang.
So, ang laki ng sweldo ng graphic artist nila, di ba yung PNP, yung last time na nag-hiring sila, parang nasa 60K.
Oo, pero ang papangit naman ng trabaho pa rin, di ba? Samantalang itong mga nasa hindi sa kinakampanya ko si Lenny, no, pero ang gagaling ng mga artist ng nandiyan si Robert Alejandro, nandiyan si pangalan nito, si Marlon Rivera.
Saka sir, yung mga murals, nakita niyo po yung mga buwis buhay na
murals.
Diba? Walang bayad yun.
Walang bayad. Well, anyway, yung mga ganun tipo. So, ito yung the power of the optics na gusto kong i-push ng gusto pagdating sa ang galing ng iba yung power of the optics talaga. Pero somehow meron din ako nakadiskusyon na malay mo yung yung tigre at agila ito ang kumakagat sa CND class. Di ba? So nag-isip-isip ako, nga naman, mas ganitong klaseng visual ang mas nauunawaan nila kaysa yung mga drawing ni Robert Alejandro na parang cartoonized na makakapag-identify ba sila dyan. Samantalang ito talagang blatant na kinat out yung mukha ni BBM at kinat out yung mukha ni... Nakita nyo ba yun? Poster na yun?
Sir, yung Game of Thrones?
Iba pa yun. Iba pa.
Diba? Tawa ako ng tawa dun
Hindi pa nila alam kung ano yung narrative ng Game of Thrones na, hey, wait, tawag nito, Jon Snow, di ba? Forgive my words, fuck Si Daenerys, di ba? Yung auntie niya yun at the same time. Di ba parang, di ba parang, alam niyo ba yung narrative ng mga visual na ginagamit ninyo? Something like that. Anyway, kaya nga sabi ko, baka kailangan nila ng visual culture scholar para mag-isip naman para sa kanila. Well, anyway, baka pwede tayong mag-apply. Apply tayo, malaki result. Hindi, joke lang. Sige, natawa si Carlo. Okay? Sige, please continue. May tanong pa kayo? Para magtuloy na tayo kay Miss Lucille, yung next part niya. Wala na? Sige, sorry Lucille medyo napadaldal ako. Okay.
Okay lang, sir.
Sige, please continue, Miss Lucille.
So, this...
Are you still there, Miss Lucille? Lucille? Hello?
Hi,
Nawala
sir.
na yata si
Sorry,
Lucille.
I forgot that I unmute myself. So, Carl Duncan, she wrote about how the male point is at the displays of Modern Art Museum or MoMA by Griselda Pollock. So she had given two examples. This is Picasso's Les Diabonon and William de Koning's Woman 1. How these two paintings can masculinize the museum space with great efficiency. So, it also, the essay or this chapter also shows how modern art seeks to experience the dangerous realm of woman matter nature and how we can also escape it into a male culture enlightenment. But at the same time, because of this essay by Carl Duncan, it was published before, and that this also gave criticism. In a way, this essay gave criticism to the MoMA, and that ever since this essay was published, this changed how the MoMA look like now, and that ever since that this essay was published, you could see now women artists or paintings of women artists in MoMA. And ayun po. Oops. Next. So, if you could imagine the painting by Les Diabonon by Picasso, it was a painting of African women with African prostitute African women with Cubism style, and that Carl Duncan said that this is not a homage to the primitive lifestyle of the African women, but rather it frames these women as the other, or the other sex, or the other thing, and in a way it objectifies the woman rather than sexualize the woman rather than showing people how their life are. And just like in Demosles, the Avnon by Picasso, de Kooning in Woman 1 also summons support of the most ancient artistic cultures. This is also in abstract, but instead of making it look like a cubism, it looks like the woman is like in a demonic rage or something. But in that way, it also shows women the potential of museum culture to showcase pornography. So this is, even if the style is entirely different and it looks like abstract but with figurative representation but different styles, it could also have an effect or emotional effect of people in spite of how women are underdressed. And that another example on collecting art and culture was that in advertisements like Penthouse magazines, New York bus shelters, they decorated this as spaces with near naked women and sometimes men, advertising everything from underwear to real estate. So they used naked people or pornographic images designed not designed to sell perfume, not to sell perfume or bathing suits, but rather to stimulate erotic desire, primarily in men. So it's like they are saying that you should buy these products to look like these persons, or get these kinds of person when you use these products. So in a way, by stimulating the erotic desire of men or women, it um, by using pornographic uh, images, it can stimulate. It could help uh, sell the product. This is also goes with as for underwear, and this is um, different when magazines only sell uh, in porn shops, but today ads or advertisements can decorate through midtown and mostly everywhere. But then again, this, for example, magazine cover, billboards, and some other advertisement cannot be considered as pornography, and can also still be legal, even if it cannot show genitals. But how the women or men are dressed in a way and stimulates erotic desire can suggest pornography, but it isn't called pornography. So for example, another example, Kuning's Woman 1 and Heineken's Invitation also refer to actually being pornography, but it doesn't get a reference from the viewer that it is pornography, but rather a painting, a work of art, or an advertisement. So that is, oh, bakit baliktad? Sorry. So, ayun sir. Um, so, sorry sir, I got my slides mixed up.
Mukha nga eh. Sige.
Um, so, ayun. So, on collecting art and culture, James Clifford naman argues that this fascination of objects of other people's never respected the work of art, but rather it shows how a work of art is how do you call it, like it is acquisitive, possessive, or rather it is what do you call it, like like as uh, a symbol for status. So um, sometimes it is and that it is also contradicted to souvenirs, artifacts, kasi these are not considered as art, but they are a representation in art, and sometimes are art, but they are not considered as art, but rather souvenirs, ethnographic artifacts, and that cultural artistic authenticity, or rather the real artifacts or um, real images of art are considered as something more expensive and um, can elevate one's status or can symbolize one's status by objectification and preservation of one culture or the revival of one culture or something like that. So he also said how personal treasures cannot be made in public. And then, for example, Egyptian figurines, the collector will be expected to label them, to know their dynasty, to tell interesting about them, and to distinguish copies for um, originals. But the collection itself is of a static structure. It is valued and um, it is negatively marked for fetishism. So, um, but at the same time, it is supposed to savage or deviant of relation of idolatry and erotic fixation. So at this so which means that the collection and fetishism is mediated with classification and display intention, with accumulation and secrecy. So meaning how we collect art and how people collect art and how people uh, collect culture is not being made in public. At the same time, it the accumulation of this would hinder culture revival, or at the same time the accumulation with this is through secrecy, and therefore um, the souvenirs and such will not become art or something like that. That's what I understood. And that in the museum there are four semantic zones, and you have a zone for authentic masterpieces, number two, authentic artifacts, three, the zone of inauthentic masterpieces, and four, the zone of inauthentic artifacts. So in this world with art market, museum and such, um, these artifacts are selected uh, upon rarity and how it is guaranteed as a vanishing culture status, and that in this way, if it's very rare or it is vanishing in cultural status, the pricing of or the price of this or the value of these masterpieces or artifacts are being uh, are getting high up, and that with these semantic zones you have um, the authentic and authentic one are being separated, and the masterpieces and the artifacts are also separated. And so Clifford says that we should also arrange them into a symbiotic grid that cuts slice across the Western visual pyramid, and that he says that the authentic pieces, the artifacts, this should not be separated, but should be this should be uh, this should be separated, and it should be arranged into a symbiotic grid. Uh, and at the same time, the art culture system is dependent on its own from the non-Western culture, meaning the Western should be separate from the non-Western culture, and that non-Western objects are sufficiently admired in separating Western and non-Western culture. objects are then sufficiently admired, like Benin bronzes or the Ming vases, and it can also be transferred into an art side being without disturbing the system, meaning the art can these artifacts can also be considered as art and not just an artifact, and that it also is possible for an artwork to move towards the culture side. So ayun. So meaning an artwork could be considered as an artifact of a particular period or a particular time, and that the also an artifact can be considered as an artwork, uh, just like the Ming vases. So so that this is why, by separating the objects in a museum with what is authentic masterpieces and authentic artifacts, inauthentic masterpieces and inauthentic artifacts, they should be separated in order for people to understand what is art, what is not, and what is good, if it should be considered art or it should be considered cultural. Although this what is cultural and what is also an art can be also be the same. So it's a little bit um complex. So this is what Clifford made for a diagram for the art culture system. So this is how they are marking up an artwork for authenticity. So you have connoisseurship in the museum or art market. Then you have history of folklore and the ethnographic museum, culture of art. So this is authentic, and but um, if it's authentic and not culture, fakes, invention, this is a masterpiece. But if it is a culture for culture, it is authentic, and that it is was made into a tourist art, it is an artifact. So this is how he thinks how to distinguish what is authentic, what is inauthentic, and what is masterpiece and what is an artifact. So an art can be singular, culture, non-culture, and non-art. Non-art is reproduced, commercial, and not culture is new, uncommon, and then art is original, singular, culture is traditional and collective. So does this make sense to you guys? Or
Yeah, okay. Siguro one of the ano no, if I may interject again, Clifford's essay actually discusses about the dichotomy, no, the dichotomy of art and
art,
culture.
yes.
So what is non-art and what is non-culture, parang ganun tipo. Now, one of the ano no, one of the discussion or highlights of the essay is parang this one no, dichotomizing or kumbaga paano pinaghiwalay yung usapin ng sining no at ng craft ng art no at ang craft, sabihin na natin muna na craft, parang ganon. So mapapansin niyo sa mga museum no, pagka sinabing museum, usually yung mga cultural artifacts yung mga naka-display doon no, about the kunyari sa Cordillera ano no, museum, IDES no, napapansin natin na ito yung kunyari yung mga bulol, yung mga
Hagabi.
Hagabi,
Textile.
mga ganyan tipo, saka yung mga ano yung coffin nila, wooden coffin, mga ganyan tipo na parang dinidiscuss dito yung ethnographic material culture, and even sa ano no, sa National Museum natin no, pinapakita or dinidisplay dito yung mga tawag niyan, manunggul jar, ito yung mga sample ng mga artifacts na naglalarawan, no? Bilang mga material culture ng isang bayan, ng isang parang I don't want to say ethnic, parang ethnographic museum, ito nga yung sinasabi, no? About the history and the folklore, mga ganyan tipo. On the other side, no, sa gallery naman, o kahit sa museum, meron pa rin tayong tinatawag na high art, no? Parang, like for example, dito nakalagay yung mga, tawag niyan, yung kay Juan Lunan, napakalaki. Spoliarium, no? Sa senior moment na ako, ano ba ito? No? Spoliarium, no? Tapos, yung mga paintings nila Hidalgo, and so on and so forth. So, nakahiwalay yung artifacts as culture. At nakahiwalay yung mga arts as original, parang original, authenticated na nagawa ng mga masters, parang ganyan tipo. Di ba? So, mga hiwalay ang artifacts, kung mapapansin natin sa table na pinipresent ngayon ni Lucille, no? Hiwalay ang artifacts sa masterpieces. No? At paano to nagkakaroon ng authentic at inauthentic, parang ganyan tipo, no? So kunyari, bakit siya eto may cross dito ng art and culture, no? Yung mga craft, mga curio collection, no? Bakit hindi natin siya kino-consider na art, no? Pero part siya ng kultura artifact siya tulad ng mga man in a barrel sa Baguio na may malalaking titi, di ba? Tama ba? Ito yung mga curio collection tourist art ito no? Minsan meron pang mga ashtray na talagang yung phallus na wooden ashtray na yung phallus napakalalaki. Sa Baguio meron ito. Meron pa rin ba niyan? Ibes?
Opo, sir.
Yung mga titing
Sa Sunday
malalaking
market.
ashtray. Oo, parang ganun tipo. At binibili talaga ng mga tourist ito. No? So mapapansin mo, hindi yan art. No? Meron tayong ganung klaseng pagtingin. Dito na pumapasok yung class and race. Di ba? Class and race dichotomy or hegemony or dominance. No? Parang, ba't ka bibili niyan? Pero tuwan-tuwa yung mga tourist niyan sa mga ganyang klase. Di ba? Tapos, kahit sa Boracay, kunyari, no? Or sa Palawan, no? Merong mga gumagawa ng mga imprint clay na merong nakalagay na El Nido. Di ba? So, tuwan-tuwa yung mga mga tourist, no? Gagawa sila ng mga slab clay, tapos sila mismo gagawa, tapos may El Nido, tourist yan. Pero kultura ito, dito rin bumibenta, di ba? This is their commodities, this is their, parang, di ba? Parang malaki kita nila dyan, di ba? Pero we're not considering this as art, not art, parang ganun tipo. We're on the other side, kumbaga, masterpieces, no? Parang ito na yung mga kunyari yung mga connoisseur. So sino yung mga connoisseur sa mga art masters na nandyan? So nandyan yan sa high art na gawa ni na Juan Luna, gawa ni na Amor Solo, and so on and so forth, at authenticated yan sa mga art museum, di ba? Pagka nakita mo yung mga collection ni Amor Solo, kunyari sa Ayala Museum o kaya sa National Museum o kaya kung saan mang big museum, kasi authenticated at ito yun inauthenticate at may nagsabing mga connoisseur, di ba? Tungkol na ito ay gawa ni ganito at ni ganyan. So these are the masterpieces. Whereas on the other hand, no, kahit naman yung kunyari Museum of Technology, ready-mades and parang anti-art ba yun, mga gawa ni na Sir Mel sa Science Museum? Not culture ba yun? Tama ba yon? Tawagin nating not culture? Pero art pa rin siya, di ba? Have you
Yes,
been
sir.
to Science Museum? No,
Yes.
yung mga airplane, yung mga dolphin na gawa ni na Sir Mel? Yes, have you been there? Di ba?
Yes, sir.
Di ba?
Opo.
So, hindi siya kino-considered na culture, parang these are the technology and yung mga ganung tipo. Hindi siya art and so on and so forth. No? So ito yung diagram na pinipresent ni James Clifford, no? With art culture system. Pero one thing, babalik na naman tayo sa discussion natin, no? Paano ba nabuo? Ano ba yung cultural hegemony para natin tingnan na ito ay art, ito ay craft, or ito ay non-art, ito ay, na cultured, and so on and so forth. Kunyari, ang nagsasayaw ng ballet sa CCP, no? Against or compared to, no? Yung mga nagbe-breakdance or nagti-TikTok dito sa kalsada at nire-record nila sa street namin. Actually, sorry, medyo bubulong ko na lang. Baka marinig ako ng kapitbahay. Marami kasing nagti-TikTok na mga teenagers dito sa street namin. Parang ganun tipo. Tapos, nire-record nila. Parang, tropa-tropa sila. Yung mga ganun, mga teenagers. Anyway, parang, so how would you compare that? No? The street TikTok recording and the ballet performance sa CCP. Di ba? Sino yung nagsabi na itong nagti-TikTok non-art? Sino nagsabing ito ay high art? Di ba? Paano natin tinitingnan yan? Kung tayo as educated reader, definitely sasabihin natin, hindi ko maintindihan yung TikTok na yan. No? At ako ay pupunta sa CCP at manonood ako ng ballet. Something like that. At nandun na yung class. Ito na yung sinasabi natin. Yung class gaze. Di ba?
Sir, parang naalala ko yung dinidiscuss ni Althusser sa ideology and ideological state apparatuses.
Yes. Kay Althusser yan actually.
Apo.
Mm-hmm.
Sa paano tinatakda ang sining, alin yung high art, alin yung hindi art.
Yes, exactly. I think i-discuss ninyo yan sa 202 nyo, 201. Di ba sa 201, diniscuss ninyo yan? Si Althusser, Louis Althusser, saka si Gramsci, no? Parang ganon. So anyway, ito yung diagram para ma-elaborate natin yan. Okay? Sige, thank you. Naku, mahaba at hindi na makakapag-report si Edith niyan.
Sorry.
Sige, please. Please continue, Lucille.
Last
Sorry,
na to.
ha?
Last na to. Ay, hindi pala. May isa pa. Tapos na. So, ayun. So lastly by Clifford said that by trying to exclude certain objects as mere cultures while exalting others in art, traditional criticism finds itself endlessly repeating the terms of binary opposition, so characteristic of modernism. So,
ayun yung sinasabi kong binary
Yes.
opposition or dichotomy.
yes, sir.
No? Kung paano natin titingnan yung mga
Sense.
bagay-bagay. Yan. Sige, please continue.
So, lastly, Tropical Amnesia by Paul Virilio. So, Paul Virilio says that virtual culture has developed a means to trying to move beyond this impasse, and that the analysis is still important. You have to analyze the visual, designs, the gender, the class, and the race. All of this needs to be put into a different framework, but these key all elements are not objects. Even if it's cultural, artistic, visual, gender, class, race, these are not elements. But attributes like light, movement, speed, these are some of the elements. And that Virilio sees that modernity is a constant acceleration of transmessage of messages. For him, the engine of change is war. He says, not really war as in war na kailangan may barilan and stuff, but rather the visual field is reduced to the line of fire, especially on how there is a surplus of images or how we are overloaded with images. So um, he Virilio then argues that the crisis of postmodernism is not the death of God, the man, or the art, but rather what happened is simply the progressive disintegration of faith in perception. So, because there's a lot of we're overloaded with images, we tend to parang forget it, and that there is a disintegration with framework, or our level of perception just gets a bit too much, and that in a way it becomes disintegrated. So in a way, this shows how we can be productive to step outside the disciplinary frameworks, and that we should instead be looking at the art or the image um, as it is, and then simply ask, what am I looking at and why? So that is your tropical topographical amnesia, because we have so much images. Topographical amnesia, that is that we have so much, we take so much images, we get overloaded with images. So one thing he says is just to focus on one image, just to look at one, and then in yourself you just have to ask, without um parang the elements like the cultural, the uh the sign, gender, class, race, we learn about this, but at the end of the day, what matters is, when you look at the picture, we have to ask ourselves, what am I looking at and why? So that is the topographical amnesia. Yun lang po, sir. Sir?
Tapos na yung report, no?
Yes.
So that's it yun sa part 2, no?
Part 1.
Yung part 2 na ba to? Part 2 ng ating yung kay Virilio, topographical. Do you have any comments? Naintindihan ba natin yung part 1 na diniscuss ni Miss Lucille? Any question? Malinaw naman, no? So actually to summarize the part 1, no, it's very important, no, that we are very we look at, or we read at visual culture, no, based on on our experience. Tapos how are we going to deconstruct, no, tulad nung sinabi ni Virilio, na paano natin siya titingnan, bakit natin siya tinitingnan, at ano yung nagiging experience natin sa pagtingin ng pang-araw-araw nating visual culture na tawag niyan, na perceive, no, parang ganon. An example, kunyari, ang ganda kasi ng mga ating mga profile picture, no, kunyari, ano yung how do you read yung profile picture ni Ides? Of course, if we're going to apply the optic optic theory, of course may maliwanag diyan. We can see the contrast, no, the figure na naka-black, high contrast yung black, tapos yung background niya, no, may depth yon because of the perspective, may lines, no, paano natin titingnan, di ba? So we look at it semantically muna, kumbaga. Tapos syntactically, no, or structurally, no, or composition. She is on the right side of the frame, on a square frame. Di ba? Kasi ito lang, maybe this is because this is the limitation of the Zoom profile picture. Square tayo lahat yung frame natin. Nakita ninyo? So structurally, she is composed doon sa right side. Okay? And then, pragmatically, meaning making, ano yung background niya? It has depth. It has, because of the perspective, we perceive depth. Because of the semantics, we perceive the element of figure and the ground. No, using gestalt. Parang ganon. Ano yung pragmatic niya? The figure is carrying a baby girl, no? And at the same time, she is in place. Ano yung space ng picture? At malalaman mo ngayon kung sino siya. Kung ano yung ini-emulate ng kanyang visual meaning ng kanyang profile picture. Tama? Carlo, how do you read yung profile picture ni Ides?
Sir, parang yun nga, merong mga iba't ibang mga elements na kung paano natin ito tinitingnan dyan sa point of view ng isang creative. Pero at the same time, meron siyang kino-convey na, meron siyang ini-impart sa atin na image na at the back, nandun siya sa isang mobilization, parang gano'n, na may movement. Tapos, meron siyang dalang bata na parang pinapakita din na parang nanay, parang gano'n. Umulat din sa bata, yung sa yun po, napapansin ko.
So, ganun natin tinitingnan, or ganun natin, ayun yung sinasabi ni Paul Virillo, no? Parang, inuugat natin, hindi lang yung face value ng picture. No? Kunyari, yung sa akin, profile picture ko, no? So, malinaw na, nakabarong yung mama na yan, tapos merong suot na sablay, tapos siya ay nakasalamin, no? So, tinitingnan mo yung semiotic or yun yung signs leading semiotic. Same din sa sa profile picture ni Carlo. Di ba? Na is he using a handcrafted mask against COVID ba yan? Against pandemic? Parang ganun tipo. Gawa niya ba yan? And at the same time, mukhang tong taong to artist ito kasi yung kanyang mask, parang ganon, and so on and so forth. So, ganon din natin titindan yung tanyari yung kay Lucille, no? At yung kay Raquel, na, mukhang nasa beach ito, mukhang ang sarap pumunta, and something like that. Diba? So, we have this reading, no, using visual culture. Parang ganon yun, Okay? So, any more question?
Parang po siya, no? Yung mga elements kung paano tinutuhog. Tapos nagkakaroon siya ng yung meaning making.
Exactly, oo. Tapos, paano natin ito ngayon i-apply sa ating art making? Ayan ang magandang tanong. No? Kunyari, ano ba yung pragmatic na gusto nating, o ano yung ating art meaning na gusto nating ilagay sa ating sa ating thesis proposal. Meron ba tayong art meaning na gustong sabihin? No? Parang ganon. At paano natin gagamitin yung visual language? No? Yung visual language natin. Paano natin gagamitin to convey our art meaning? So yun yung ating yung challenge actually dito sa pagbubuo rin ng thesis natin. Okay? Sige. Let's move on to we still have 1 hour. Okay lang bang tayo hanggang 12? Para ma-cover yung kay Ides report. Hello, Ides. Ayan, si Ides na yung magre-report. You can share your screen.
Okay.
Nandiyan ba si Malaya? Marang nakikita ko on the background.
Opo, sir. Malikot
Ilan taon na si Malaya?
7 na po, sir.
Diyos ko, parang kailan lang nakikita kung pinapadede mo pa lang yan.
Opo, diba?
nung nag-aaral ka.
Dinodrawing na ng mga kaklase ko nun yung dede ko kasi kabisado na nila.
Diba? Sige.
Opo.
Okay.
Sige. Pasok tayo dito sa chapter 2, Visual Culture and Everyday Life. So, maganda tong chapter na to kasi nagdi-discuss siya ng paano yung ina-apply no yung visual culture. Paano to nakikita sa araw-araw nating buhay. Yun. So, meron siyang 6 na bahagi. Number 1, yung nag-compile ng buong libro na si Nicholas Mirzoff. Yan, may introduction siya sa part 2. Number 2, si Marshall McLuhan, Women in a Mirror. Kung maalala natin si Marshall McLuhan yung nagsabi,
The medium
is the message. Oh. So, parang sinasabi niya na mahalaga yung medium. Parang halimbawa kung yung TV mismo, hindi mahalaga ano yung laman ng TV, pero yung TV mismo, mensahe na siya, parang ganyan. Tapos, si Anne Reynolds, yung visual studies niya, dito magdi-discuss siya ng isang magazine niya nung bata, tapos isang museum, tapos kung paano na may pakiramdam na parang hindi siya bahagi ng target audience, parang ganyan. Tapos, si Michel Desertou, kung tama, sir, Michel, minsan kasi hinanap ko yung pronunciation, yung iba Michael, yung iba Michel Desertou, from the practice of everyday life. Yun, dito naman, mula dun sa pagkahiwalay nung mga nasa laylayan, ganyan, dun sa discussion ni Anne Reynolds. Dito iikot yung discussion ni Michel Desertou on tactics tsaka strategy. Paano mo haharapin yung araw-araw na buhay nang alam mo namang hindi agad mababago yung kalagayan ng status quo, no, na may naghahari, may pinaghaharian, parang ganyan. Tapos si John Fisk naman, yung sa videotech niya, didiscuss niya dito no, kung paano yung low-tech, high-tech. Halimbawa yung mga cellphone natin na may camera, ganyan. Paano tayo parang sa araw-araw natin pamumuhay, parang nasa surveillance tayo, ganyan, dahil may mga CCTV, etc., etc. Tapos kay Marita Sturken, yung The Wall, the Screen, and the Image, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, tatalakayan niya dito, particular yung isang memorial, yung Vietnam Veterans Memorial, tapos paano iba-ibang pagtingin dito, no? Kasi medyo tragic, no? Yung Vietnam War, ganyan. So, yon. Sige. So, sabi ni Nicholas Mirzoff, collectively, itong mga essay na to show how the interpretation of visual culture in everyday life first become possible as a mode of critical activity in the post-war period until it is now one of the preeminent tasks confronting those deserve to call the intellectuals. So, pag mapapansin natin, lahat ng essay, nalikha siya 1980s to 1990s. Pinanganak na ba kayo nito, Lucille, Raquel?
Ako, hindi pa.
Thank you, Carlo.
Mr. Denial si Carlo,
Ayan. So, 1980s, 1990s, no? Kaya marami nang nagbago rin dahil 2021 na ngayon, no? Pero applicable pa rin yung mga bagay na to, yung i-discuss nila. Okay, sige. Yan. Si Marshall McLuhan, tong essay niya ng Women in a Mirror, bahagi siya nung The Mechanical Bride, Folklore of Industrial Man. Study to ng popular culture, tapos mga short essay. Sir, magpatay lang po ako ng video.
Please, para inesita yung bandwidth mo, malakas sa bandwidth kung may video.
Sige po, sir, yan. So, ito, bahagi ito ng The Mechanical Bride, no, Folklore of Industrial Man, study to ng popular culture, composed to ng 60 essay. So, yung Women in a Mirror, isa siya dun sa 60 essay ni McLuhan. Tapos, yung style niya ng pagsusulat dito, ay itong buong libro niya na to, siya, parang mosaic approach ng pagsusulat ng libro. Ganyan, katulad ng 1961 yung libro na Gutenberg Galaxy. Tapos, bawat essay, magsisimula siya sa newspaper or magazine article ng isang advertisement. Tapos, mula dito, i-analyze na to, analyze yung aesthetic, tapos ano yung implication ng mga imagery tsaka ng text dun sa buong society. So, yun. Yung libro niya, umiikot to sa idea ng media industries na yung goal nila, ganyan, yung objective nila na i-manipulate, exploit, and control the public mind. Mainly, concerned about the merging of sex and technology in advertising. Okay. So, yan. Sa Women in a Mirror, nagsimula yung essay niya sa Girl Before a Mirror, yung painting ni Pablo Picasso. So, dito sa painting na to, makikita natin, no, yung, yung model niya pala dito, no, si Marie Therese Walter. Mapapansin natin to sa maraming portrait ni Picasso. Laging ito yung model niya. So, dito makikita natin, yung parang isang buong cycle, no, sa buhay ng isang babae, parang ganyan. Yung isa sa kaliwa, nakikita natin yung malayo, masyado mainit. Sorry po. Sa kaliwa, makikita natin yung usual, no, conventional day na buhay ng isang babae, no, na ginagawa niya yung maghapon niyang trabaho, o kung may anak siya, nag-aalaga siya ng anak, nag-aasikaso ng bata, nag-aasikaso ng bahay, parang ganyan, no? Yung karaniwan, nagtatrabaho siya o nag-aaral siya, ganyan. Tapos, yung nasa kanan, yung tragic na itself, no? Ito naman yung pagharap niya sa mga kontradiksyon, tunggalian ng buhay, etc. Parang ganyan. So, mula dito, no, parang nakapagbigay siya ng isang time capsule, ng isang buong buhay, no? Ng isang buong buhay. Kasi sa buhay naman natin, di ba, tuloy-tuloy na may mga okay kang panahon, may mga panahon hindi ka okay, ganyan. Tapos tuloy-tuloy tayong humaharap sa mga struggle, no? So, yun. Kaya itong paraan ng juxtaposition tsaka contrast, no? Mula dito mapapansin natin yung yung susunod niyang ipapakita, no? Yan. Para siyang poster, advertisement, no, ng Birkenshire nylon stockings. So, tungkol, advertisement siya ng stockings. Familiar ba? May gumagamit pa ba ng stockings ngayon? Pero karaniwan, ito yung ginagamit. Ang napapansin ko, sir, sa mga sales lady sa mall, di ba, parang required ata sila magsuot ng stockings. So, yun. Advertisement siya para doon. Tapos, yan. Sa essay niya, nagsimula siya dito. Yan. Eto, yan. Just another stallion and a sweet kid. What was the sound of glass? A window gun in the subconscious, or was it nature's fire alarm box? The ad men break again the mind again. The ad men break through the mind again. The Senate Subcommittee on Mental Hygiene report that it wasn't loaded. The Greeks manage these matters in myths. Ganyan. So, yan. So, ito daw, parang katulad nung kabila, no? Juxtaposition, ganyan. Pag mapapansin natin, walang symbolic unity, no, sa pagitan ng babae, di ba? Tsaka nung nagwawalang kabayo, parang ganyan. Pero pag makikita natin, no, may isang kabayo na nagwawala, ganyan, na para siyang classical sculpture. Tapos, yung babae na, syempre mukha siyang, diba, sa unang tingin nila mo, para siyang taga-Hollywood, ganyan. Tapos, pero pag inaral pa mabuti, no, parang ayun, sabi pala, yung kulay nito, no, nitong ad, dinidescribe siya as borrowed from the sun-soaked gold of stallion satin coat. Yan. The color that's pure sensation for the loveliest legs in the world, ganyan. So, makikita natin, isang nagwawalang kabayo, no, kontra sa pagitan na nagwawalang kabayo tsaka ng isang babae na gentle, refined, aloof, innocent, parang ganyan. So, sa totoo, ang tingin ni McLuhan dito, na isa tong strategy ng debasing the powerful modernist technique of montage, pero nagpapakita siya, no, ng reading pleasure in seeing through the ad. Superficial technique to its real message. Ang real message, sexualized message. Parang ganyan. Sige, tapos nagdagdag siya dito ng isang quote kay Gatsby. Saglit lang. Okay po. Sorry po. So, nagdagdag siya dito ng isang quote, no, mula sa The Great Gatsby ni Scott Fitzgerald. Her face was sad and lovely with bright things in it, bright eyes and a bright, passionate mouth. A promise that she had done gay, exciting things just a while since, and that there were gay, exciting things hovering in the next hour. So, yan, parang talaga siya, pag-fantasize, pag-sexualize, pag-objectify sa mga kababaihan. Ganyan. Okay, yun lang yung first part. Mixing lang, 2 pages lang. May tanong? Okay, sige. pasok tayo kay Anne Reynolds' Visual Stories. Dito sa essay niya, parang pinapakita niya dito yung kung paano yung mass media tsaka yung public institution, no? Pag pinagsama, parang paano nila in-educate yung mga post-war consumers para gawin yung mga extra visual leaps. Ibig sabihin parang pausbungin, no, sa mga consumer na lagpasan pa ang yung mga bagay na karaniwang nakikita nila parang lumagpas pa doon. Parang ganyan. So yun, tatalakayin niya dito yung My Weekly Reader noong 1960s, no? Ito yung weekly educational na classroom magazine para sa mga bata. So, nandun to, nasa US to, no, kumakalat sa mga public school mula 1928 hanggang 2012. Ayan, nagsimula siya dito sa pag-quote dito, no, a working country is hardly ever a landscape. The very idea of landscape implies separation and observation. It is possible and useful to trace the internal histories of landscape painting, landscape writing, landscape gardening, and landscape architecture, but in any final analysis, we must relate these histories to the common history of a land and its society. So doon iikot yung buong discussion yan. No? Siyempre kapag sinabi nating landscape, no, yung ito yung visible na feature ng isang area, di ba, ng countryside or land, na madalas kino-consider to dun sa aesthetic appeal niya, 'di ba? Pero paano nga ba yung isang working country? Paano halimbawa kung yung Hacienda Luisita, 'di ba? Kung saan grabe pinagsasamantalahan yung mga magsasaka, 'di ba, na minasakir pa to nung isang sinubukan nilang manawagan para pataasin yung sahod ng mga manggagawang bukid, 'di ba? So, kaya nililinaw agad dito na yung landscape, yun, nag-i-imply siya ng separation and observation. Ganyan. Sige. So, nagsimula tong essay niya, yung unang-unang bahagi nito, tungkol dun sa, pagbabalik tanaw niya dun sa childhood magazine niya na My Weekly Reader. Tapos, ito yung isang in-example niya dun, no, sa study. Your read and study guide, ganyan. So, hindi masyado siguro nababasa, pero sige, basahin ko lang, no. Pinapasagot 1966 to, tapos pinapasagot siya sa 9 years old na mga bata, ganyan. So, ang tanong doon, study the design of the superjets on this page and on the front page. How are these two planes alike? How do the two designs differ? So, sumagot agad yung isang bata nandito sa bandang baba. Sabi niya, they are pointed on the front. They have different wings. Diba? Parang tama, diba? Kasi may visual guide ka, may visual cues ka. Tapos sabi niya, they had different engines. Pero makikita mo dito, wala namang drawing ng engine, diba? Wala naman dun sa image yung drawing ng engine. So, pinagpalagay niya na magkaiba yung engine nila dahil magkaiba yung wings. Parang ganyan. Kaya parang dun sa information na binibigay, hindi talaga visible yung engine. So, sinisikap parang ang objective niya ay magkaroon ng extra visual leap, no? Mula dun sa given na engine. Ganyan. Tapos, yan, the enhancement of visual images with additional layers of information does not result, however, in seeing more, but only differently. Usually, extra visual leaps occur at the expense of aspects of these same images the lesson makers have determined to be irrelevant or detrimental to their educational aims. So, depende siya dun sa gumawa kung alin yung tingin niyang irrelevant, alisin niya, no? Pero sa totoo, hindi ka naman talaga hindi talaga nito tinutulungan na maging makakita pa ng higit pa, parang ganyan. Pero titingnan mo siya sa ibang pamamaraan, parang ganyan. Yan. Tapos, yan. Kaya yung sinasabi niya kanina sa weekly reader, tinatranslate nito yung visible differences into markers of information that was literally invisible, katulad ng engine. Sige. Tapos yung isa pang diniscuss niya dito, marami pa siyang example na tungkol dun sa My Weekly Reader. Ang tingin niya dito, parang dumulo siya na hindi lang, parang hindi lang naman, yung mga tanong na to, hindi lang naman to para sa kanya, di ba? Kasi, para to sa lahat ng public school na audience, ganyan. Pero, nababahala siya sa ganun sa ganung pamamaraan. Ganyan. Tapos, yan, ito yung national history, ito yung sumunod niyang diniscuss, no? Marami rin siyang tatalakayan dito, no? Yung American Museum of National History. Isa tong complex, no, na may 26 na interconnected building, ganun siya kalaki. May 45 permanent exhibition siya. Tapos, yung museum collection nito, may 34 million specimens of plants, animals, fossils, minerals, rocks, meteorites, human remains, human cultural artifacts. So, sana meron tayong mga ganito rin. Pero wala tayong budget dyan. Sige. So, ito si Albert A. Parr. Dito nakalagay Sir Alfred sa readings niya, pero nung ni-research ko, ito po yung lumabas si Albert A. Parr. Norwegian-born American zoologist, oceanographer, zoologist na naging director ng American Museum of National History mula 1942 hanggang 1959. Yan. Tingin ni Parr, lahat ng exhibit dun sa American Museum of National History, particular yung mga diorama, no? Tingin niya hopeless ito, out of date in terms of contemporary scientific knowledge. Yan. So, tingin niya, dapat daw, sabi niya, according to Parr, the introductory hall should be the hall in which we meet our public on the basis of its common experience. So, susi dito tong common experience, no? Tsaka itong public. Sino ba yung public na tinutukoy niya at anong common experience yung binabanggit niya? Which is a point from which we have to start if we wish to guide our visitor from his own knowledge into ours and from his own everyday experience into the new experience which science may have to offer him. So, sa umpisa na parang ang ganda kasi kino-consider niya yung muna, yung experience no, ng public, ng target audience nitong national history, nitong Museum of National History. Parang ganyan. As plans for the introductory hall progress, Parr increasingly referred to the AMNHS, ito yung American Museum of National History's explanation of the totality of nature. Sabi niya, as the story it should tell, is aimed to tell a story and to tell it so well that the visitor would recognize its unifying presence and messages goes hand in hand with Parr's desire to reveal the presence of science within and the relevance of science to everyday experience, since for him, storytelling embodied the repetitive rhythm of the familiar and the everyday and could easily describe nature's cycle and system. So, yan. So, parang gusto niya, no, yung paraan ng storytelling. Ganyan. No, dun sa, yung gagawin dun sa introductory hall, no? Kaya, so, gusto niya, yung new introductory hall, magkwento ito, no? Kwento to ng isang local landscape. Yan. Kaya yung mga designer nito, kailangan magtrabaho no, mula sa, ang reference nila, yung totoong landscape. Ganyan. So, yan, nung binuksan yung exhibit, no, nung May 14, 1951, yung Felix Warburg Memorial Hall for Man and Nature na itong bahagi na to, syempre, lumanding to sa mga newspaper, maraming review tungkol dito, tapos, tingin talaga ng kalakhan, no, na innovative yung aspects ng hall display. So, marami itong mga ganito, mga diorama, ganyan. So, ito yung unang diorama na makikita pagpasok, no, yung An October Afternoon near Stising Mountain. Ito lang yung nahanap ko na reference So, galing to sa website nila. Yan. Ito yung una nila makikita pagpasok dun sa entrance, no. Yan. Kaya ang tingin ng mga, aesthetically pleasing siya dahil dun sa kulay niya, ganyan. Tapos picturesque yung composition. Tapos, ito yung background mural ng diorama. Tapos, sa harapan niya, meron pa dyan mga animal, birds, insects, plants, soil specimens, na nakalagay siya, no, sa kakaibang parang sobrang narrow na hall, ganyan. So, yung mural, parang halos kasing layo lang siya ng isang, pag inabot mong gano'n ng kamay mo, no, yung isang kanan ng kamay mo, ganyan. Ganun siya kalapit sa audience. So, medyo medyo na-compress, no, para i-fit siguro dun sa area meron sila. Yun. Kaya yung resulta nito, no, parang may distortion. Parang ganyan. Pero kapag mula ka sa entrance, makikita mo siya ng buo, no? So, merong ibang mga bahagi daw to na kapag nandun ka, no, parang masyadong malapit kapag tinignan mo, parang ganon. Kaysa sa kapag totoong tinitignan mo siya, dapat medyo may distansya siya. Pero pag nandun ka, dahil nga na-distort yung image, parang masyado siyang malapit. Yan. Kaya medyo nakaka-disorient yung visuals, no? Tapos, yan. Para alisin yung ganong discomfort, no, yung ganong nakaka-disorient na bahagi ng exhibit, no, ng diorama, kailangang lumayo ka, no, punta ka doon sa may entrance o kaya lumapit ka masyado para hindi mo kita ng buo, no, yung buong diorama. Yan. So, yun. Tapos may isa pa siyang, yan, marami pa siyang sample dito, no, pero pumili lang ako ng dalawa. Itong isa yung life in the soil. Ito naman, dito pinapakita niya, no, ito yung mga bagay na hindi natin nakikita pag, halimbawa, nandun tayo sa ibabaw tayo ng lupa, ganyan. So, pinakita niya dito yung ilalim, parang ganyan. Yung mga invisible na bagay sa ilalim ng lupa kung nasaan. Halimbawa yung mga earthworms, chipmunks, small burrow nest, yellow jacket nest, ant nest, hibernating frog, at iba pang mga bagay na nagaganap sa ilalim ng lupa, no? Ordinarily, invisible to sa atin, pero mahalaga para sa existence ng tao na nasa ibabaw na maintindihan niya rin ano yung nagaganap sa ilalim. Etong display naman na to, so mga picture to, no, labeled, blown up photographs of microscopic images of root system. So, dito sa mga images na to, no, makikita mo agad yung formal similarities niya. Halimbawa, yung primarily, ito yung mga vertical yung orientation, no, ng lahat ng to. Tapos, identical yung mga colors, no, ng background nila. Kahit spring, winter, pero yung background niya pare-pares yung kulay. So, yun. Tapos, pare-pares yung klase ng specimen, no? Kaya ito, nakaka-encourage daw to sa visitors na magkaroon ng visual tsaka conceptual association yung tinitingnan nila, no? Yan. Tapos ito, binubuo niya yung pag-unawa natin sa soil tsaka sa local landscape ng soil, no? O kaya yung soil in general, parang ganyan. Tapos, all of the exhibitions, strategies developed by the Warburg Hall designers offered museum visitors visual access to the normally unseen working of nature or to the distant historical and geological past of the region through what were then deliberately unusual display techniques. These strategies were also meant to transform the daily activity of vision itself into a more self-conscious activity, extending it beyond its natural limit in space and time. So, yon. Pero ang tingin niya, no, kahit pa nga ibinigay ito, no, nung Warburg Hall designers o nung mga diorama na nakita doon, no. Pero paano ba talaga magagawa, halimbawa, yung gusto kasi ni Park talaga, maging effective, no, yung exhibit, ganyan, kung saan magiging familiar sila, no, dun sa mga sites, sa local landscape, ganyan. Pero paano ba talaga ito magagawa? Mangyayari lang naman yun, no, magagawa lang naman na ma-educate talaga kapag pumunta na sila sa local landscape. Pero problema din doon, hindi naman din talaga nila makikita ano talaga yung nasa ilalim ng soil, di ba? Unless magsaka sila. Parang ganyan. Tapos syempre, ayan. Sige. Tapos syempre, inilinaw, no, na ang target audience pala yung sinasabing common experience ng public na binabanggit ni Park kanina. Public, ang tinutukoy niya dito ay mga city dwellers. Na hindi yung mga lokal na naninirahan doon. Sabi niya, itong mga city dwellers, ito raw yung pumupunta, mag-check out ng mga landscape para experience, pag-enjoy yung aesthetic value nito or mag-picnic sila, no? O mag-relax lang, ganyan, manood ng nature, parang ganyan, no? Pero hindi niya target dito yung mga magsasaka na naninirahan doon, ganyan. So yun, yung pagpili niya sa urban audience, primarily strategic to, no? Kasi ito yung inaasahan niya potential na donor, no, ng museum, ganyan. Kaya eto, sige, basahin ko muna to. So not only was the Warburg Hall's visual story of the local landscape partial, but the community of mutual understanding and interdependence promoted through the hall was limited, as it was based on the interests of residents of a single geographic region and primarily the middle and upper classes who occupied only one position in the region's agricultural economy. Sige, kaya yung total story no, nung landscape, syempre mahalaga kasama dyan yung participation no, nung magsasaka no, dun sa lupang pinapakita mo, ganyan. Pero naging bahagi naman to ng exhibit, pero mainly, mga display na pinakita nila, ito yung mga ani, ganyan, o kaya yung mga hayop na alaga nila, di ba? Na hindi talaga pinapakita yung practical na problema ng mga magsasaka dun sa particular na lupa, parang ganyan. So, yun. Kaya parang naetsapwera, no? Naetsapwera yung mga magsasaka, yung mga karaniwang tao dito sa museum na ito. Okay. Ayun po. Tanong, baka may tanong kayo sa part 2. Okay, saglit lang po.
Okay lang, please continue.
Okay, sir. Sige po. So, eto naman. So, mula dun sa saglit lang po, sir. Kaya mula dun sa ganung gap, no, sa pagitan ng parang orchestrated na paraan ng, dun sa pinakita kanina na yung urban living at kung paano talaga namumuhay yung mga nasa laylayan. Doon umiikot naman yung essay ni Michel de Certeau. Ganyan. So, nag-impisa, ito yung, ang pinipili ko lang yung mga umpisa ng essay. O kaya ibang mga tingin kung mahalaga, no? Yan, sige, basahin ko muna. With these examples of terrains on which one can locate the specific modalities of enunciative practices, the manipulations of imposed spaces, tactics relative to particular situations, the possibility is opened up of analyzing the immense field of an art of practice, differing from the models that, in theory, range from top to bottom in a culture certified by education, from the universities to the elementary schools, models that all postulate the constitution of a space of their own, a scientific space or a blank page to be written on, independent of speakers and circumstances, in which they can construct a system based on rules ensuring the system's production, repetition, and verification. So, yung art of practice, no, tingin ko ito yung isang Tsaka ano ba yung terrain na tinutukoy niya, no? Sige, mamaya, palalimin natin yan. Pero maganda yung art of practice na binabanggit dito. Kasi, nag-discuss siya, no, yung La Peruque. Familiar kayo? Yung La Peruque, daw to? O yung the wig, parang piluka? Parang ganyan. Parang ganun po.
La Peruque.
La Peruque. La Peruque. Okay,
piluka actually, yung wig.
Okay.
Ni Roque. Oo. Piluka ni Roque. Ayan. Sige.
Okay po, sir. Thank you, sir. Ito daw La Peruque, no? Is paraan to ng isang manggagawa na mga manggagawa, saan ba sila nakikita sa mga pabrika, no? Sa pabrika, pagawaan, assembly line, sa mga industriya, no? Na kung paano, kunwari, paano niya ginagamit yung oras niya, no? Diba, 8 oras karaniwan yung trabaho, ganyan, sa loob ng isang pagawaan. Paano niya gagamitin yung oras niya para i-divert, parang ganyan, para lumikha ng mga bagay para sa sarili niyang kapakinabangan, o gamitin yung oras niya para maging malayang lumikha pa ng ibang bagay para hindi siya malunod dun sa 8 oras na pagtatrabaho sa pagawaan, parang ganyan. Kasi di ba ang itsura, yung 8 oras na pagtatrabaho, sa totoo, di ba, minimum wage natin 500 plus, no? Nag-iiba pa yan sa mga region, di ba, 300, 400. Pero sa totoo, no, meron tayo isang case study, halimbawa sa Coke, wala pang isang oras, no, yung halagang 500 pesos na minimum wage, wala pang isang oras na gawa na ng manggagawa yun. Yung halagahan ng 500 piso. Ibig sabihin yung 7 oras na pagtatrabaho niya, hindi na ito bayad. Ito na yung tubo no, na pupunta sa kapitalista. Pero dahil matagal pa, kailan mo pa mapagbago yung ganong sistema? Parang paano mo gagawa ng pamamaraan no, na hindi ka naman masamantala ng todo-todohan, parang ganyan. So yan, nag-example siya dito no, ng La Peru. No? Pwede daw itong kasing simple halimbawa ng isang sekretary na gumagawa ng love letter niya habang nasa oras ng trabaho, ganyan. O kaya isang gumagawa ng aparador no, na hihiramin niya yung mga gamit sa loob ng pagawaan para gumawa siya ng sarili niyang mga gamit para sa sarili niyang bahay, ganyan. Kaya yung La Peru yun, pag-divert siya ng oras, no, para sa sarili mong oras na maging malaya, maging creative, no, na hindi ka na pagsasamantalahan para sa tubo, parang ganyan. So yon. Kaya yung discussion niya talaga dito sir medyo mahaba pero tingin ko mas umiikot siya sa strategy and tactics. No, parang yung strategy, ibang strategy yung binabanggit niya dito, parang ito yung specific way, no, is particular na paraan ng pag-exercise ng power ng mga ruling class, no. Ruling class, mga kapitalista, at iba ba, mga Panginoong may lupa, no, kung paano nila papanatilihin yung kapangyarihang to, no, paano nila papanatilihin yung status quo. Tapos yung sinasabi niyang La Peru, ito naman yung tactics, no, kung paano naman yung karaniwang mamamayan, no, yung mga nagbabayad ng buwis at pinagkakakitaan, pinagtutubuan no, ng mga naghaharing muli, paano niya i-resist, paano niya haharapin, lalabanan, no, dun sa pang-araw-araw niyang buhay. Kaya yung everyday life, tingin ko yung from the practice of everyday life, no, yung everyday life na binabanggit ni Michel Dessertu ay isa tong lugar no, para sa tactics, na punong-puno ng tactics para sa karaniwang mamamayan. Siya bumubuo sa malawak na populasyon, no? Isa itong lugar para sa posibleng pag-exercise natin, no, ng ating pagbangga, na pagharap, no, dun sa totoong mundo, no? Parang ganyan, sa totoong mundo ng may status quo, ganyan. Na aminin man natin o hindi, napagsasamantalahan tayo, ganyan. Yun.
Siguro to dagdag din sa
Sige po,
sinasabi ni ni tawag niyan nitong si Desert 2 no tungkol sa Le Peru. Parang this is actually brought about by industrialization, and it was actually well discussed by by Karl Marx when it comes to parang political economic theory, no, ni Karl Marx, na
yes, sir.
Paano yung yung mga manggagawa, no, paano na separate yung kanilang yung work, di ba, yung labor sa kanilang, paano nila makakamtan yung sarili nilang oras. Kasi sabi mo nga, because of industrialization, parang the capital actually impose their time, no? Parang sa kanila. And
Yes,
makikita mo, yun 1 hour na ginawa because of industrialization, 1 hour na trabaho ng manggagawa, ito lang yung bayad sa kanila sa 8 hours na yan. And 7 hours are actually the profit
Yes,
na
sir.
to ng kapitalista, no? Sabihin na natin, naku, baka
Apo.
marinig ito, DDS pa naman yun, joke lang, kapitbahay ko. Tapos di ba, so yun nga, ito ay parang bunga ng bunga ng industrialisasyon, ng political economy, no,
Yes, sir.
political economy ng isang lipunan, parang ganun tipo. At paano nagko-compensate, no? Paano ginagamit ng mga manggagawa yun, magkaroon sila ng oras. In fact, kasi I sat down as a thesis committee member sa isang MS class ng CHK, no? At ang topic nung master student, no, ay tungkol sa work and parang labor and hobby. Parang ganun
Opo,
tipo, no? So parang kasi because of industrialization, nasa-separate na natin yung na-dichotomize natin. Pagka hindi siya work, pagka hindi siya labor, hobby siya. Di ba? Parang
Yes,
gano'n. At yung hobby, dinidevote lang natin yung oras natin. Pagka may free time, quote-unquote, may free time ang isang tao, kaya nagiging hobby. Parang gano'n. Parang, kunyari on my part, no? Ang trabaho ko ay nagtuturo. Samantalang ang hobby ko, nagpuputik ako. Something like that. No? Where in fact, hindi naman siya pwedeng ma-dichotomize eh. Meron kasi sa iba, no? Yun example ng thesis ng taga-CHK, actually yung movement ng katawan, 'di ba? Yung physiological movement kasi at least nasa CHK sila eh, no? Yung mga gumagawa ng mga kaldero sa Pampanga, yung mga lutoang bakal, ang tawag niyan. Parang ganon. So, mga kawali sa Pampanga, parang ganon tipo. So, during their break time, eto na yung sinasabi nating leperuk. Ano yung ginagawa nila during their break time? No? It's either naninigarilyo, di ba? Or magiinom sila in between, parang ganon tipo. Okay, after ng kanilang trabaho, magiinuman yung mga manggagawa. Parang ganon. O kaya mag-yoyosi in between, o kaya kakain ng mga lumpia and so on and so forth. Mga ganon yung thesis ng no? Nakakatawa rin, ang ganda. And I raise a question actually. So itong mga functional items ng mga kawali, kaldero, and so on and so forth, no? Ito ang trabaho nilang ginagawa. Pero paano mo naman titingnan, no? Yung mga, kasi ayun, mamumukpok yung kanyang thesis, mamumukpok ng Pampanga. Ibig sabihin yung nagpupukpok ng gumagawa sila ng mga kaldero, kawali. Meron din mamumukpok sa Pampanga na gumagawa ng mga ang ginagawa ni Jandy. I forgot yung term ng ginagawa ni Jandy Carval.
Ay, opo, sir.
No? Yung mga ganon, pero ginagamit
Repoussé.
Repoussé. No?
Yes, sir.
Mamumukpok din kasi yan ng Pampanga eh. Yung mga maraming repoussé artist sa Pampanga na ginagamit to sa simbahan, parang ganun tipo. So ito naman, hindi siya trabaho, hindi siya labor, kundi devotion. So nagkakaroon ng mga kanya-kanyang leperuk, no? At pagka devotion, hindi ko naman trabaho yan, hobby ko yan, devotion ko to sa simbahan para gawan to ng mga repoussé, yung kanilang altar and so on and so forth. Nakuha ninyo yung diskusyon ng leperuk. Ang ganda kasi nito eh. Paano hinihiwalay, no? Nagkakaroon ng dichotomy pagka sinabi nating yung oras yung oras ng mga manggagawa na ilalaan sa paggawa at ano yung mga free time nila na gagawin nila. Parang ganun tipo. So ayun yung diskusyon nito. Tapos of course parang ito nga yung sinabi, no? Yung dominant power, no? In-exploit ito ng dominant power, yung time allocated. Yung time allocated ng mga manggagawa, exploited by the di ba? Parang ganyan. So yun lang yung discussion ni Dessert 2. Okay, sige.
Yes.
Tuloy.
Kaya po kaya hindi siya hindi siya pagnanakaw ng oras. Sa totoo, parang creative tactic siya eh. Dahil
Yes,
parang sa panahon na structured yung oras natin, no? Structured yung space, ganyan. Sabi nga yung kay Thomas Aquinas, sir, na parang sabi niya yung theft is permissible in cases of extreme need. Parang sa kay John Valjean, di ba? Sa Les Miserables, di ba? Yung kumuha siya ng tinapay, di ba? Pero sabi ng batas bawal yan, kaya lang nagugutom na yung pamilya niya, parang ganyan. Hindi ito pagnanakaw eh. Di ba? But, kailangan sa isang lipunan na namamayagpag yung pagsasamantala, no? Namamayani ang nangingibabaw yung tubo.
Oo.
Kailangan talagang magkaroon tayo ng creative tactic paano tayo makakasurvive araw-araw. Parang ganun po. Sige po, mas yun lang sir yung discussion
Ito
niya.
lang, oo. Maganda yung discussion. Actually,
Oo.
gusto ko tong part na to, yung ano pa? Visual
Opo.
culture in everyday life.
Opo.
Oo.
Tapos, si John Fisk naman, ano siya, media scholar.
Ayan, favorite ko rin itong theories na to, si John Fisk.
Cultural theorist. No?
Sa
Kaya lang sir,
videotech
parang,
to videotech.
Opo. Kaya lang kamamatay na niya ng July 12. Ito
No.
pong nakaraan, 2021.
Talaga?
Opo. Tapos, yung primary areas niya ng intellectual study niya, intellectual interest niya ay yung cultural studies, critical analysis of pop culture, media semiotics, and television studies. Marami siyang inadapt no, mula dun sa kay Dessertuna theory no, ng consumption ng mass media at technology. Tapos, yun, nagsimula siya sa isang YouTube video nung kay Rodney King. Pamilyar ba tayo? Okay. Sige.
Yes. Oo.
Yung kay Rodney King, no, video ito ng isang binubugbog no, na ano.
May YouTube video ka niyan?
Meron po, sir.
Sige, can you play it?
Sige po, sir. Saglit lang po. Stop share. Okay. Sorry. Nahilo ko sa... Ayan. Saglit lang po. Share. Rodney King. Okay. Eto. Ayan.
Blank screen pa rin. Nag-start pa lang. Ayan, okay. So similar din to sa nagkaroon din ng parang video ngayon. Lately lang yung namatay na black na niluhuran sa leeg. I forgot his name.
Opo.
'Di ba? Nakunan din ng video. I think cellphone camera yung nakakuha. Parang ganon or CCTV. Parang ganon. So, yeah.
Sir, meron din sa atin. Yung
meron
kay Jonel Nuesca, yung police.
Ano
Diba? Na pinatay niya yung mag-ina.
Yes. Yun din isa pa.
Familiar ba tayo?
Oo. Yung mag-ina, binaril niya because of yung anak niya na nagsumbong. Di ba? Yung anak na babae nagsumbong sa ano. Yes.
Ito, sir.
Maganda yon. Oo. Naku, ayoko makita na. Sige, okay lang i-play mo.
Okay na.
Pero hindi ako titingin.
Okay na, sir. Hindi ko din kaya.
Hindi ko kaya makita.
Opo eh. Pero familiar siguro tayo, no? Kasi kumalat yan sa internet, no? Sa Facebook. Yan. So,
maganda yung discussion ni rito eh. Ni John,
John Fisk.
John Fisk.
So, sabi niya, no, believe in a monitored society. Yan, kung saan maraming CCTV, no? CCTV, closed-circuit television.
Ngayon, mga cellphone na rin.
Ngayon, cellphone, no? Pati SIM card, di ba? Parang may isang rally no, ng SONA. After nung mobilization, lahat ng nanggaling dun sa SONA, no, nakatanggap ng isang message na mga ano kayo, mga NPA kayo, gano'n. Lahat lang na nandun sa isang area na yon, parang ganyan. Kaya ramdam mo talaga no na parang kahit saan ka pumunta, may nakatingin, parang ganyan. Kaya kang i-monitor. So yung video tapes, no, nakakatulong siya sa mga police, no, para i-identify, hulihin yung mga kriminal. Pero kasabay din nun, no, katulad dun sa nangyari kay Joel Nuesca, yung police na pumatay dun sa mag-ina, nagagamit din natin, no, yung makabagong teknolohiya para yung mga nagsa-surveillance, i-surveillance din sila, parang ganyan. Kaya yung, parang sinabi dito, no, yung bawa sa US, no, yung may mall doon, Mall of America, 109 yung camera na nandun, no. Tapos, kaya niyang i-zoom hanggang sa kasinglit ng ID card. Ganun katindi yung technology nila. So, yung information technology, no, highly political siya. Pero yung politics ito, hindi directed ng technological features alone. Yan. Halimbawa, yung technical feature ng surveillance camera para i-identify mo yung person, yung tao, no? Mas madali mo siya ma-identify depende sa race niya, di ba? At sa gender niya. Parang ganyan. Kaya yung isang lipunan halimbawa na racist, no? Siya yung nagtatransform ng information na makukuha niya mula sa technology na to. Ayan. Kaya yung social differences, no? Katulad ng race, gender, ito yung mas madaling i-monitor. Parang ganyan. Lalo na halimbawa, di ba ngayon, grabe talaga, no? Ilang dekada na yung pagtingin dun sa mga maitim ang balat, di ba? Sa atin naman, may sa mga Muslim, di ba? Grabe yung racism, ganyan. Yan.
Kahit sa mga ano, ang tawag niyan, yung mga nakatira sa ano, stilt sa Zamboanga. I forgot. Ang dami ngayon pagka magki-Christmas. Badyaw.
Badyaw, oo nga, sir.
Ganon, di ba?
Oo, sir. So, ganun, no?
Pagka may blonde hair ka, sabihin, oy, para kang badyaw. Di ba? Ginagamit na pang-aglahi o pang-degrade sa isang race or sa isang class.
Yan. Kaya yung economics, no, nung araw-araw na buhay, dito mas efficiently no na-apply yung ganitong kapangyarihan sa technology. Nag-example din siya, halimbawa, halimbawa yung sa US daw yung social security number, no? Ito dinodocument nito kung gaano karami yung sinasahod mo, gaano karami yung pera pumapasok sa iyo. Tapos paano mo siya kinikita, no? Paano ka nagtatrabaho, ano yung trabaho mo, bakit ganito kalaki yung pera mo. Yung credit card number naman, no, tinatrack naman ito lahat ng pinipili mo, lahat ng ina-avail mong services. Yung zip code, dinodocument ito, saan ka nakatira, yung demographics. No? Kaya parang ano ka talaga, nakakahon, parang ganyan.
In fact, yun, even our social media usage,
Apo,
no? Yung tinatawag na, ano, ang tawag niyan, senior moment tuloy ako. Analytics ma?
Opo.
Di ba? So, nagkakaroon tayo ng profiling.
Opo.
Parang ganun tipo. Di ba? So, kunyari, nilike mo nang nilike yung mga ano, no? Tawag nito, yung isang furniture, ano, parang ganon. Kasi recently, nagganap ako ng parang gusto kong makakita ng furniture sa IKEA. Then suddenly, ang daming sponsors ngayon, no?
Opo.
Sponsors ng mga furniture na nag-replacement sa aking Facebook, yung mga ganun tipo. Di ba? So may consumer profiling, may political profiling. At dito rin ginagamit ng tawag niya yung mga nagre-red tag nitong yung grupo ni Nabadoy.
Opo.
Di ba? So ayan yung sinasabi ni Fisk. Okay.
Opo. Kaya yung consumer profile, no, hindi lang siya parte, no, ng individual social identity, no. Mabilis ito na matatransform para maging political profile. Halimbawa, yung ilalike natin sa Facebook, di ba? Yung mga post, mga pamats, mga videos. So, pag nilike natin yan, makikita agad sino-sino yung mga nag-like, di ba? Pag gusto nila i-profile to, alam na agad nila sino-sino tayo, parang ganyan. Kaya, sorry po, yan. When social differences advances the interest of the powerful, it will be recognized by them. When, however, their interests are promoted by alliances that cross the social differences at issue, it will be overlooked by them, no? Kaya, ayun, yung ruling class, depende, no, kung paano niya titingnan, parang ganyan. Kapag tingin niya banggato sa interest niya, dead ma lang siya, parang ganyan. Pero kapag tingin niya para sa sarili niyang interest, game siya, ganyan. Kaya yung kasabihan daw, yan, maganda itong discussion niya on, sa camera, the camera cannot lie. Hindi na daw siya inaccurate and out of date. Pero hindi naman siya stupid, for it does point to key differences between words and photography in terms of the immediacy and totality of the social control that can be exerted over them. So, yung pinili ko ditong image, yung naglalakad si Duterte, parang nangangampanya siya, diba? Na kunwari, isa siyang matipid, no? Simpleng tao, karaniwang
tapos sira yung sapatos.
Tapos, parang una sir, diba, lumabas lang yan na ganyan. Pero hindi ko na mahanap yung image na siya, photo ops talaga. Parang ganun. Kaya yung technology, no, pwede niyang i-determine ano yung ipapakita niya. Pero yung society, siya yung magtatakda. Ano ba talaga yung makikita niya sa isang image? No? Ngayon ba, pag tinitingnan to, di ba, hindi na ganun ka, ano, na parang, nakakaawa naman. Hindi eh, kasi grabe na yung mga pinagdaanan natin. At alam natin hindi totoo, no, na nakamahirap, parang ganyan. So, yun. Because technology requires capital, it is never equally distributed or apolitical. Ganyan. So, hindi pwedeng maging apolitical siya. Parang ganyan. Ngayon, sino bang may hawak ng pinakamalaking capital sa isang lipunan? Diba? Halimbawa, sa loob ng SM, tad-tad ng ano yun, tad-tad ng CCTV, no? Kaya nga nung may isang empleyado na kumuha ata ng lata ng, hindi ko na maalala sir kung sardinas o...
Nido yata? Nido whatever. Para sa
diba?
anak niya, di ba?
Opo, diba? Ganong katindi, diba, na ang laki-laki na ng tinutubo nila, diba? Pero takot na takot silang mawalang kahit kapiraso. Ganong katindi. Tapos, ayun. Kaya, yan. Kaya yung kanina, no, yung video, yung sa simulang video, no, ni George Halliday, tungkol dun sa US, no, wala siyang computer enhancer. Nung panahon na yon, no, 1991. Pero hindi niya rin kayang i-slow-mo, di ba, noon. Hindi niya kayang i-freeze, i-reverse, no. Pero dahil video low siya, video low yung tawag niya sa low-tech, parang ganyan. Mas authentic, no, sa totoo yung naging itsura nung video na yun. Yung kaibahan naman kapag video ay no, yung ginagamit sa media, nabawala dun yung authenticity. Parang ganyan. Kasi kaya mong i-edit, pero ngayon, di ba, pwede ka na mag-edit kahit sa cellphone.
Sa TikTok lang kaya.
Hindi,
ang maganda rito yung paano kinategorize ni Fisk yung video high na sinasabi, no? Pagka video low, no, crude yung pagkakuha, di ba? Parang direct, na no editing, kumbaga, yung raw crudeness. Parang ganon. The more raw at the more crude, mas authentic. Parang ganon tipo. Whereas the video high, na tulad kunyari sa news, no? Parang may editing na kasing ginagawa, may manipulation ng ginagawa, parang ganon. Nawala yung authenticity na tinatawag. So, kaya yung example niya yung kay Rodney, o kahit yung magtama na sinasabi natin kanina, no, nakuha kasi to ng isang rude crude isang shot kumbaga o raw shot ng cellphone, parang ganung tipo, no. Mas pinapaniwalaan natin na ito ay totoo. In fact, kahit nga sa kanina nung ipapakita ni Ides, ayoko makita dahil kinikilabutan pa rin ako makakita ng ganito dahil alam kong authentic, alam kong totoo. Parang ganun tipo, 'di ba? Yun yung mga yung mga sinasabi ni Fisk na video law, whereas yung video high nandito na yung may insertion of editing, nandito na yung may narrative yung creator, meron na siyang ini-impose na narrative na kwento, parang ganun tipo. So parang we find it, no, na hindi siya ganun ka-authentic, parang ganun yun. Sabihin na natin na kunyari sa CNN siya, they can still manipulate it, di ba? Pero kahit na nasa CNN siya at yung clip na inilagay, no, ay raw or rude, crude or raw, no, we can still find it as authentic. So kunyari nakita natin yung black na, I forgot his name, na niluhudan sa hanggang mamatay, di ba? Parang ganon. Tapos may video ba tong si Kian na nagsasabi siya na may klase pa, huwag niyo papatay, di ba? Yung ng EJK?
Opo,
Kian
sir.
ba yun?
Opo.
Wala siyang video, no?
Wala po, sir. Wala.
Pero narinig lang ng mga kapitbahay na may klase pa, parang ganun tipo. So, di ba, parang nakakaantig na ng damdamin dahil alam natin na totoo. Hindi siya nakunan ng video, pero na-witness siya. Parang ganun yung video high, video low konsepto. Okay? Sige, tuloy.
Yes, sir. Kaya sabi niya, no, yung video plays such an important role in our culture because in its low and high-tech forms, it spread far up and down our social hierarchy. But video low does not always oppose video high. Indeed, often the two work complicitly. Kaya, halimbawa yung mga docu-film, no, naaral na rin nila no, kung paano gagamitin yung video low. Halimbawa, meron dito ang example niya yung America's Funniest Home Videos, 'di ba? Kung bakit siya nakakatawa kasi talaga hindi siya scripted, ganyan. Tapos tayo, syempre, Pinoy, 'di ba? Gaya-gaya, ginaya natin. Meron tayo wow mali.
Wow mali. Yeah.
'Di ba? Kung bakit siya ginagamit din talaga ng mainstream media na yung video low para para paano rin niya kikilitiin yung audience niya dahil nga may ibang impact yung video low eh. Kahit halimbawa sa panahon ng kalamidad, no, mga baha, video low yung gamit, 'di ba? Mga cellphone, yun yung kino-cover halimbawa ng GMA, yung EBS, 'di ba? May nag-upload sa Facebook na ganito, yun yung kukunin nila, ipagpapaalam nila, na ipapalabas sila sa sa news, ganyan. Yun. Tapos, yan, armies of law enforcement agencies and security services use millions of video cameras to monitor the places and the people they are hired to protect. But video technology still allows on occasion those who are normally monitored to monitor the monitors. Mahalaga to no lalo sa atin sa Pilipinas na yung national police no na parang to serve and protect na motto no, pero marami ng instances, maraming pagkakataon lalo sa panahon ng war on drugs no. Yung kay Joel Nuesca, dahil nakunan to 'di ba? Paano yung kilakiyan, no? Yung libo-libong namatay, 30,000 na namatay sa war on drugs. 'Di ba? Pero walang nakakasuhan dahil walang video. Ganun. Ganun kasimple. Yun. Mas ganun pumiko tapos yung video low and video high. Sir, medyo mahaba tong kay Marita Sturken. Ito yung pinakamahabang essay po sa part 2.
Sige. Oh.
Okay, sige. The wall, the screen, and the...
Yeah, actually, I love this essay, no? It's all about yung sculpture ng Vietnam veterans, no?
Yes, sir.
And mapapansin natin to, we can still also Bantayog ng mga bayani dito sa may Quezon Ave. Similar
Yes,
to that Bantayog effect. Sige, diretso natin.
Itong Vietnam Veterans Memorial na sinulat niya noong 1997, itong memorial na ito makatatagpuan Washington, D.C. Pagkilala to dun sa serbisyo ng mga naging member ng US Armed Forces nung panahon ng Vietnam War. Natapos to noong 1982, itong wall na to, 246 feet na granite wall, tapos naka-engrave dito yung mga pangalan ng mga sundalong namatay sa gera. Ganyan. So yung Vietnam War, kung matatandaan natin, mula November 1, 1955 hanggang April 30, 1975. So, 20 taong gera, hindi makatwirang digma, na inilunsad ng US sa Vietnam, di ba? Para
pigilin. Hanggang ngayon talagang sising sila dahil talo sila ron.
Opo. Kahiya-hiya sila dahil ang isang US na superpower, advance ang technology, napakarami nilang pinansya, makinarya, pero natalo sila ng isang maliit na bansa, napaka-low-tech ng teknolohiya, di ba? Parang ganyan. Etong digma na to, pagpupursige ng US, na pinondohan niya yung South Vietnam para pigilan yung paglaganap ng communism, Kasi pag nanaig yung panahon kasi ito na yung China, yung Russia, yung USSR, di ba? Panahon yan, nakatatagumpay nila ng gera at nagtagumpay yung mga communist, ganyan. So, natatakot yung US na kapag pati Vietnam, mawawalan siya ng mga malakolonya niya, parang ganyan, kung saan pwede niya ibagsak yung kanyang mga surplus na materyales, na produkto, pagkunan niya ng murang raw materials, yung bansang Vietnam, murang kaya niya dinigma yung Vietnam. Batay sa pakunawa ko, baka iba yung kwento sa inyo. Sige po. So, yun. May quote siya dito kay Arthur Danto, Sabi niya, we erect monuments so that we shall always remember and build memorials so that we shall never forget. So, yun yung pagkakaiba ng monumento at memorials. Kung sa atin halimbawa mga monumento nila Rizal, 'di ba, Bonifacio, yan, mga bayani, no, para sa pag-alala dun sa kadakilaan nila, paglaban nila sa mga mananakop na dayuhan. Ibang memorial, no. Kaya mas ano siya, pagbubuwis ng buhay sa ano pa mga naging dahilan, parang ganyan. Pero sa atin, no, yung bantayog ng mga bayani na sinabi ko kanina, yung bantayog, yung translation niya, ano monument. Pero kasi dahil itong bantayog ng mga bayani at yung mga nagbuwis ng buhay nung panahon ng martial law. Diba? So, yan. Yan. Kaya ito yung Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Ayan. So, yan. Ito siya, mahabang pader. Parang letter V. Ganyan. Ganun kadami yung mga pangalan na nandyan. Yun.
Ito yung listahan ng mga war veterans sa
Opo.
Vietnam na namatay
Opo.
during service. Parang gano'n yan. Yun yung ginawa ni
Opo. Ngayon, naging yung mga sundalo mula sa US na nakadigma sa Vietnam, hindi to voluntary na gusto ko sumali sa gera, ganyan, di ba? Hindi ganun. Draft to, no? Meron silang process ng pag-draft. Ibig sabihin, pipili sila, no? Sige, 18 years old pataas, lahat ng malulusog, ganyan. Pipiliin yan. Hindi ka lang mapipili kung halimbawa meron kang sakit, may kapansanan, physically hindi ka fit, no, para sa gera, o kaya naka-enroll ka, parang ganyan. So, kalakhan ng mga sundalong lumahok dito, no, sa digma na to. Mga anak ng mga maralitang manggagawa, magsasaka kasi ito yung mga hindi makapag-aral, di ba? Hindi sila makapasok sa school. So, yan yung mga napili. So, involuntary yan. Sayang mo sa gusto pag napili ka, wala ka magagawa. Join ka sa digma, parang ganyan. Yan. Kaya, yung essay ni Sturgeon, no, pagtalakay ito, no, o pagsisikap niyang matalakay masuri kung paano nabuo mula at sa pamamagitan ng Vietnam Veterans Memorial, yung mga alaala lang nakabatay sa iba't ibang naratibo, iba't ibang kultura, parang ganyan. Iba't ibang pagtingin dun sa digma, no? Sige. Yan. Kaya sabi niya dito, yung the screen, no, yun, yung public remembrance, no, ng Vietnam War, pwede raw siyang pag-aralan gamit ang konsepto ng screen. Yan. Sabi niya, yung screen, isa sang surface, no, na pwede kang mag-project ng kahit anong bagay doon. Pero isa rin siyang bagay, no, isa siyang object na pwede niyang itago ano man yung nakikita mo. O, diba, napaka-political itong marito. Diretso pa po, alas 12 na po. Medyo mahaba pa.
Yes,
ito po yung pinakamahaba
next week na.
Para
ito na lang yun okay.
Apo, last na to.
Tapos, sino yung susunod na reporter?
Si Kelly.
Ako po, sir.
Hi, Kelly.
Yan. Tutuloy na lang natin yung report ni Ides.
Sige, sir.
Next, kasi 12 o'clock na rin. At medyo nag-aalam na tayong iba yung
Apo.
Okay, kasi parang kakain pa. Okay, sige. Now, thank you very much. This is interesting report. Yun yung tungkol sa ating visual culture.
Yes, sir.
No? So, yun na lang
Okay,
na
sir.
tapos yung kay Raquel yung susunod na reporter.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Maraming
Sir.
salamat.
Salamat.
Happy weekend. Okay, happy
weekend.
weekend. Bye-bye. Sige, bye-bye.
Bye.